Sumi, and welcome back to my channel again. So for today's video, I would like to share the biblical principles of health. And thank you for Tomorrow's World for sending me this free booklet. So the author of this booklet is Dr. Douglas Iswinale. He is a PhD doctor. So, did Jesus do away with biblical health laws? What has modern science discovered about them? And are they still applicable today? So let's find out, friends. How do we approach health? In this booklet, the first chapter is talking about disease and age-old curse. Choices with consequences. How do we approach health? Is good health a matter of luck, or can individuals make decisions that can improve the quality of their lives and even extend their lives? In the opening chapters of the book of Genesis, we read that God planted many trees in the Garden of Eden for Adam and Eve. He called their attention, however, to two trees in particular. They symbolize two very different ways of life. We can see it in Genesis chapter 2 verse 9, each with the ability to profoundly influence all of human history. We read that God let Adam and Eve choose between these two different ways of life. Sadly, influenced by Satan, they made a fateful decision that has had far-reaching and long-lasting consequences. The tree of life represented obedience to God and embracing His way of life, outlined in the laws and instructions found in the Bible. The consequences of choosing that option and blessings of every kind, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, pictures humanity's choice to follow human reasoning apart from God's guidance. Adam and Eve chose that second tree, rejecting God's way of life in favor of a path that leads to pain, suffering, and disease. Consequences that inevitably result when human beings accept Satan's deadly influence. Moses emphasized these same choices to the Israelites before they entered the Promised Land. He said, I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and your descendants may live, that you may love the Lord your God, that you may obey His voice, and that you may cling to Him, for He is your life and light of your days. God's way of life involves obedience to His laws and instructions. But Moses also warned that ignoring or disobeying God's instructions would result in suffering and death. Regrettably, the Israelites chose the way that brought negative consequences, including sickness and disease. Throughout Scripture, we find again and again the same theme of two contrasting ways of life. Ancient King David wrote, Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. King Solomon stated similarly, The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Solomon also warned, There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. Jesus Christ taught His followers that most people choose the broad way that leads to suffering, while only a few find the narrow way that leads to life. As you will discover in this booklet, the Bible and human history bear witness to a fundamental truth regarding physical health. Human beings have chosen an inadequate approach to health and disease, very different from what God originally intended for us to follow. However, when you begin to understand and apply the simple yet powerful Bible-based principles we will discuss, you will embark on a remarkably practical path that may add years to your life and even life to your years. Of course, God promises no one continuously perfect health in this life, which is only temporary. In fact, many causes of illness and injury in this world are due to the disobedience of others and are beyond our control. As the entire world continues to reject more and more of God's way of life, it seems as if even the environment itself is turning against us. Yet, in the Bible, God provides us with powerful principles with the potential to make a real impact on the quality of our health and on every aspect of our lives. As you learn more about the biblical approach to health and put it into practice for yourself, you will be preparing for an exciting and challenging future that soon will change the whole world. As what I've said earlier, the first chapter of this booklet is all about the disease. It is an age-old curse. So why have sickness and disease been so persistent and pervasive throughout human history? When we examine how various civilizations have dealt with health and disease, some very important lessons begin to emerge. From a public health standpoint, human history is the story of a continuing struggle against disease. Mummies from ancient Egypt and medical texts from the time of the pharaohs reveal that the ancient Egyptians suffered from many of the same diseases that currently afflict the modern people of Egypt, like asthma, cancer, heart disease, varicose veins, epilepsy, blindness, scurvy, hepatitis, bubonic plague, and a host of parasitic diseases. Though many ancient civilizations had armies of priests, physicians, they never succeeded in eliminating the ever-present threat of disease. But why did they fail? Was it because they lacked modern scientific information and technology, or was it because of their basic approach to the subject of health and disease? Sadly, the picture has changed very little today. Although nations have spent billions of dollars and medical science has made enormous strides in identifying the causes of many diseases, even developing miracle cures and magic bullets to treat formerly fatal illnesses, the tragic effects of sickness and suffering still linger like a dark shadow over our modern world. We declare war on cancer, diabetes, and heart disease, yet they remain leading causes of death. Modern medicine has made an immense effort to eradicate malaria. It is a disease that helped topple the Roman Empire. Yet, malaria today is returning with a vengeance. Tuberculosis, once thought to be nearly eliminated in developed countries, is again spreading with the movements of people from less developed parts of the planet. Despite massive efforts against the scourge of AIDS, or acquired immune deficiency syndrome, the disease continues to ravage nations and destroy lives around the globe. Parasitic diseases continue to afflict millions of people. Is there something we have failed to see? Is there another road we have not taken? One that could lead to a better and healthier future in our struggle to overcome the scourge of disease? As we study thousands of years of recorded medical history, a very striking theme begins to emerge, as well as a sharp contrast. Most human societies have followed a similar approach in dealing with the problem of disease. Rather than change the behaviors that lead to sickness, people sought to invoke their gods or appease them with superstitious ceremonies, sacrifices, and offerings. Most ancient civilizations also recorded extensive lists of substances used to treat diseases. Ancient writings contain details of surgical procedures for various pathological conditions. along with spells employed by sorcerers to drive away diseases. The knowledge of their medical treatments was usually held as the exclusive domain of the priest physicians, which keep the average person dependent on the priesthood to deal with disease. In the early Americas, this private knowledge was often passed down from father to son within the priesthood. In Egypt, medical knowledge was guarded and transmitted in schools associated with the temples. The Egyptian practice of embalming the dead before burial also gave Egyptian physicians a considerable knowledge of human anatomy. The Greek poet Homer wrote, "In Egypt the men are more skilled in medicine than any of humankind," and the Greek historian Herodotus noted that Egypt was full of physicians and that each physician specialized in treating specific disease of the eye, the teeth, the stomach, and other parts of the body. A comparative study of ancient civilizations around the world reveals that in addition to superstitious practices that look to the gods for healing, such as temple, sleep, and wearing amulets, nearly all societies narrowly followed a treatment-oriented approach involving drugs and surgery when dealing with disease. None of these bygone societies succeeded in eliminating the curse of sickness and disease with such a focus. Yet, that same approach still dominates our health care system today. Systems that are become prohibitively expensive and increasingly overwhelmed as the curse of disease continues to spread around the world. While we should be grateful for the ability of modern medicine to treat disease, it is possible we are overlooking another important dimension. From the ancient Israel, the promoting health and preventing disease. And this history provides a striking contrast in the example of nation that was given a very different approach for dealing with health and disease. The example is that of the Hebrews and the ancient nation of Israel, described primarily in the writings of Moses, though related additional principles can be found throughout the Bible. In contrast to their neighbors and other civilizations in the ancient world, the inspired biblical writings of the Hebrews do not record extensive lists of drugs and substances, nor do they provide details of surgical procedures for treating diseases. Instead, the Bible provides us with fundamental principles that modern medical scientists have come to realize can play powerful roles in promoting health and preventing disease. Various commentators throughout history have acknowledged the intent and benefit of these biblical guidelines. One scholar noted that most of the biblical laws can be clearly seen to tend toward public health. The laws were wonderfully fashioned by God for the general health of the nation. And in the further contrast to surrounding cultures, Hebrew priests did not guard this fundamental principle as their private knowledge. Instead, God told them to disseminate this vital information and make these fundamental principles public knowledge by teaching the people how they could avoid the curse of disease and live healthy lives. Israelites priests were to focus on education and prevention, not simply after the fact medical treatments. Unlike the Egyptian predecessors, they avoided actual medical practice and concentrated upon the observance of health rules with regard to food, cleanliness, and quarantine. In fact, as medical historians plainly acknowledge, Moses recognized the great principle that prevention of disease is usually simpler and invariably more far-reaching than the cure of disease. Moses has also been called the greatest sanitary engineer the world has ever seen. In the public health guidelines, he recorded in Leveticus could be summed by the objects of sanitation today: pure food, pure water, pure air, pure bodies, and pure dwellings. The Bible also records that God revealed His way of life to ancient Israel so that the Hebrews would be lights and examples to the world. God desired that other nations would see the Israelites succeed and want to follow their examples. He did not want His laws to be the exclusive possession of Israel. They were meant to be shared with the world to other nations, and peoples would be able to enjoy the benefits of this God-given way of life. The writings of Moses, along with other biblical principles we will discuss, outline a very particular, practical approach to the subject of health and disease. The biblical approach focuses on education, the prevention of disease, and the active promotion of health, instead of merely cataloging cures and the ancient health laws and a modern dilemma. The Bible's laws and instructions about health pose an interesting dilemma for anyone who believes in following biblical teachings. The Bible clearly states that the certain foods must not be eaten and that certain behaviors are sinful and abomination in God's sight. Yet, professing Christians theologians have claimed for centuries that these laws were burdensome restrictions applicable only to the Jews, and that Jesus came to abolish them once and for all. Critics dismiss these ancient laws as outdated, bizarre, sometimes barbaric, and certainly no longer binding upon Christians. Yet, others who read the Bible carefully find it odd that God would command His chosen people to follow these laws and instructions for their own good. Read in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 13. Then send Jesus Christ to somehow dismiss these same laws and instructions as unhelpful and no longer necessary. Anyone with common sense can see that this just does not add up. Many of the biblical health principles are found within the body of divinely inspired laws and statutes, often referred to as the laws of Moses. Principles that have been the subject of considerable debate and speculation in theological circles as to their origin and purpose. Some scholars believe that Moses merely collected primitive taboos from neighboring nations to form a code of laws. Others claim that the designations of clean or fit for human consumption and unclean, unfit for human consumption were purely arbitrary, irrational, and unexplainable. Some speculate that unclean animals were imperfect members of their species. Yet, if you told that to a pig, you would probably get a well-deserved snort of disgust. Some misguided theologians also assert that the biblical health laws have nothing to do with health, but were merely rituals designed to separate the Israelites from their pagan neighbors, and that only Jews, if anyone, need to observe these laws today, or they simply assume these laws are relics of temple worship that are obsolete in our day. However, all these attempts to explain or explain away the biblical health laws are woefully inadequate and totally overlook historical, scientific, and biblical facts and observations that support very different conclusions. It is quite informative and instructive to read what more objective reference books say about the biblical health laws. Haley's Bible Handbook states that Moses' law, including its health and food regulations, was far purer, more rational, humane, and democratic than and showed wisdom far in advance of anything in ancient legislation, Babylonian, Egyptian, or any other. Edmund's Handbook to the Bible states, "Today we are more able to understand and appreciate the sound principle of diet, hygiene, and medicine which these laws express. Commenting on Leviticus 11, the Expositor's Bible Commentary states, the Levitical laws of cleanliness have no known extensive parallel in the surrounding cultures. So the idea that Moses borrowed primitive taboos does not hold up, because surrounding cultures exhibit little of this sort of law. These are rather amazing statements. Although some scholars mistakenly assert that God gave the biblical health laws for ritual and ceremonial reasons rather than health, the Expositor's Bible Commentary correctly states that the spiritual and hygienic reasons for the laws may still be affirmed. They are remarkably valuable in the area of public health and protected Israel from bad diet, dangerous vermin, and communicable diseases. These were rule of thumb laws that God gave in His wisdom to a people who could not know the reason for the provision. Thus, the claims that these biblical health laws are outdated, old-fashioned, irrational, and have nothing to do with health are simply nonsense, biblically and scientifically groundless. Learning from Israel's potential and failure. But why did God record physical health laws in the Bible, which is a book of religion and not a book of medical science? When God brought the Israelites out of captivity in Egypt, He gave them laws, commandments, and statutes that would enable them to have a relationship with Him and to be blessed above all people on earth. You can read it in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 14. Those laws included fundamental health laws designed to benefit them. As we will see, Scripture clearly reveals that health is the result of learning and obeying the physical laws and principles that God designed to promote health and help prevent disease. In the Bible, sickness and disease are the result of turning away from God and ignoring and disobeying these fundamental laws and principles. Any society that understands and obeys these laws is a healthier society. God plainly told the Israelites, "If you diligently heed the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in His sight, give ear to His commandments and keep all His statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you which I have brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." Exodus chapter 15 verse 26. These same instructions is repeated in Exodus chapter 23 verse 22 to 25, where God told Israel that among other blessings for obedience, I will take sickness away from the midst of you. Again in Deuteronomy 7, He told Israel that because you listen to these judgments and keep and do them, the Lord will take away from you all sickness, and will afflict you with none of the terrible diseases of Egypt which you have known, but will lay them on all those who hate you. In Deuteronomy chapter 7 verse 12 to 15. While there is certainly an element of active divine blessing and cursing in these passages, we will see that it would be a grave mistake to assume this is the only element. The Bible reveals plainly that God gave the Israelites His laws for their benefit. They were in no way meant to be a burden, though so many have falsely been told otherwise. In fact, God wanted other nations to learn from Israel's way of life as well. Among His other purposes for Israel, God wanted their example to show the world a way of life that actually worked and brought real, measurable benefits. As Moses told them concerning these laws, "Therefore, be careful to observe them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples who will hear all these statutes and say, surely this is a wise and understanding people." On the other hand, God warned Israel that if they did not obey Him, plague, fever, and wasting disease would follow. among numerous other curses. And regrettably, Israel did, indeed, do just that, turn their back on God who loved them and on the way of life He had delivered to them. The results of violating the Creator's health laws were among the punishing effects that ancient rebellious Israel experienced. Yet, the lessons of ancient Israel are being repeated by many today. Sadly, many people from all walks of life, including many who consider themselves Christian, view the God-given health laws of the Bible as strange and outdated ideas that are no longer relevant in our modern scientific age. Yet nothing could be farther from the truth, as we will see in the chapters that follow. Thank you, dear friends, for being here today. I really appreciate that you took time to be here and listen to this message. God bless everyone and see you for my next video.